Well, hello guys, and welcome to a gear change show here on a here on a Saturday night. Told you guys I'd do one of these. I haven't done one for a couple of days. I did about 8 or 9 videos straight, so thought I'd take a breather and rest my mind, and then come back up with it. So it's we don't have quite a lot of vlogs and stuff like that, but we'll get there. So if you guys aren't too bummed out, but I'll keep pumping these out. I got to pace myself because I want to try to get as many as I can this year. I will. Um, I probably will be recording gameplay later tonight. So later tonight, maybe after I finish this vlog. So I wanted to give you guys um, a bit of a. So I think the last gear change show we did, I think I did my how I got into racing games and all that other stuff, um, and what got me, which ones got me into racing and how it evolved and stuff like that. So I'm actually going to tell you guys. Um, I'm actually going to talk to you guys a story. Sorry. I'm going to tell you guys a story of a. I'm going to tell you guys a story of. Let me see. Um, a very famous engine that that I usually don't do too many engine overviews and stuff like that. I want to talk to you guys about a very interesting engine. It's something that's um, and an engine that really revolutionized, um, I think, racing for quite a bit. Now, I already talked about. I know you guys are probably thinking, "Oh, he's going to talk about the Cosworth DFB." I'm not going to talk about the Cosworth DFB because that engine has been done many times. I want to talk about another 3-liter Formula One style engine that has seen many uses, and that would be the Ferrari V12. Now, the Ferrari V12, or the 12-cylinder engine, has many different iterations to it over the years. So, for those of you who don't know, the V12 has had many different configurations. The Ferrari V12 has had many different configurations and different mainstays in different cars. Now, Ferrari's V12 started out as a 1.5 liter single stage supercharger V12, and pistons that were relatively small and but it made a very robust engine. And the Formula One engine that was put in one of the early Formula One cars in like the late 40s, early 50s, made about 230 horsepower. Now it was great for small tracks, tiny itty bitty tracks that could power through and handled well. But the engine really didn't do well against two-stage supercharged cars like Alfa Romeo, Maserati, and a bunch of other ones, and Mercedes at one point. And those cars were made the Alphas and the Maseratis were making 280, 290 horsepower versus the Ferrari, which was making 220, 230. And then eventually they figured out that they were going to need more power as they went on. And Ferrari came up with the many different engines. They came up with, I think they came up with different engines. So they came up with a V6, and then they came up with a 1.5 liter V8, and then another V8, and then eventually in the in the middle of the 60s, 65, 66, 67, they made the 3-liter V12, and a lot of people know it because it makes an amazing sound. It was way better than anything. It was more technologically. It was more technologically advanced, and it was way more technologically uh, um, driven than let's say the V8s from England, the 12 cylinders from Maserati, or the 4 cylinders from Maserati, or the V16. The I think the simplest engines would have been the 3-liter V8 from Ford and Cooper, and then the DFV was sort of in the middle of the cat's meow, and then you had the Westlake V12, which was complex. Then you had the V16 from BRM, which was way too complex, way too overpowered, and way too heavy, and way too unreliable. But the V12 from the V12 from from that car was very, very instrumental in many, many ways. The 3-liter V12 has its roots earlier than the 60s, than the late 60s. It actually started as a production-based road car unit, and it was put in to the GTO, the 250 GTO, the 250 LM, and stuff like that. The sports cars of the time. Even though the 250 LM was a 3.3, should have been 275 GTO, 275 LM, but we won't get into that. And then the Testarossa from the 50s, so the one from the 57, the one with the pontoons, and the Testarossa engine, which means Testarossa. Actually, if you switch them, Rossa means red, Testa means head, red. Testa head, red head. If you switch them, that V12 made around. I think it started out around 250, and I think when they got the sports car trim, I think when it was in road car trim or GT trim, it was around 250, 260. In sports car trim, it was around 290 to 300, and the Testarossas were able to power past a lot of good cars. I mean, they gave a lot of people a run for their money in the early part of the 60s, late 50s, early 60s, including the 250 GTO. They were, and the 250. There was also the 250. There was also the 250 short wheelbase. Short wheelbase cars. Those were coupe slash open tops. You guys can see those in like 64, 65, and those cars had 3-liter V engines, and you can tell those are, and you can tell them by their noise. And I don't want to go on YouTube because YouTube will copyright me if I do it. But just look up 250 GTO or Testarossa or 250 GT V12, and you'll notice that that the engine has a very metallic-y, very deep-throated noise. It when it starts out, it'll go. It'll. And you'll hear it. It has a very distinct noise. In fact, that would be a distinct noise for V12s into the sports car era for Ferrari. And the engine started out, and as I said, in GT trim it was about 260. in sports car, well, GT trim was 260, 270, and then sports car trim was 3. Um, then eventually they kind of went away from that, and then they went to the 3 liter for the 333 SP, and then they went to the 4 liter V12 because they needed something light and powerful to take on Ford, which they couldn't do. And it wasn't until 68, it wasn't until 69, 70 that the sports car, 69, 70, that the sports car regulations were starting to change. GT40s could no longer have 7 liters, and then eventually prototypes could no longer, certain prototypes in certain classes could no longer have 5-liter engines, so it needed to be a 3-liter V8. This helped Porsche, this helped Alfa Romeo, this helped Maserati. And it started, and this is also when the flat 12 revolution started coming along. This is around 69, 70, 70, 71, 72, 73, where the flat 12 started coming to, out, and power would climb. See, a Formula 1 V12 in 68, 69, 70 was around between 410, and I think by the time the 70s rolled around, and the 72, 73, 70, 72, 73 season rolled around, the V12s for those cars were making an endurance trim. I think it was around 450, 460 horsepower. In sports car sprint trim, it was making around 500, somewhere around what the V12s in Formula 1 were making. And somewhat that what they were making with the V12s. And I think the first cars to really get this treatment was the 312 line of cars. Now the 312 line of cars would be 312 F1 and then 312P and then 312PB. 3-liter V12 would also be in Formula 1. Those cars would make around 500 plus horsepower. And then the 312 PBs would make between 460 to 500 horsepower, depending on trim, and they had all sorts of different body styles. But the one thing that was the same was the ability for these cars to compete well. They were very, 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 very competitive, and especially in sports car trim, when in 71, when the Porsche, Ferrari, the 962, the 912, the 917, and the 512s were considered obsolete. When that happened, as they said, they saw a loophole in the rule book. They built 5-liter GT sports cars, even though they were prototypes, even though they met all the rules, and so on and so on, etc., etc. So what they wanted to do is they took their knowledge from the 5-liter V12 that they put in the 512M and the 512S, and they put it in, and then they applied it to the Formula 1 car. And the Formula 1 derived engines were very good. They won races. I think the V12s, or the flat 12s, most successes were in the 72 and 73 season in sports cars. If you look in the 72 and 73 World Championship make races, you'll see that Ferrari had a stranglehold in 72. They won almost every single race they entered. They didn't go to Le Mans because they weren't totally set on the reliability. They didn't know if they were going to last or not. And then they sat there and said, well, we got the championship at hand. We're dominating. We're not going to go to Le Mans. If Alfa Romeo wants to go, I think the thinking was Alfa Romeo was going to go and probably help them out. And stuff like that. And it really didn't, because Matra ended up winning with their 3-liter V12, which was a Formula One winner in the late 60s, early 70s. And 72 proved to be their best year. A bit of a turning point in 73, because it was the year that Matra would seriously put on a really good championship performance. And I don't think Ferrari was quite ready for it. So if you guys if you guys are into sports cars and the sports car racing scene whatsoever, you guys will know that the 73 World Championship of makes, or car makes back then, the WCM, the World Championship of Makes, WCM, was kind of a battle of the Titans with Ferrari. Ferrari was very, very, very insistent that they'd win everything. And they did quite well, but back then, sometimes domination can sometimes have its downsides. Back then, point systems were a little different. The moral of the story is the Ferrari 312 PB in its 34 form, in a 74 form, was an amazing performing car. And morally, it should have been the winner of the championship, but it was down to a points technicality. So today, when you race a car, when you go to a race, you score points. Your points get tallied up at the end of the year, and every single point counts. So you can't. There was no such thing as. So there's such a thing as having a bad race and it going towards your championship. That's usually pretty bad. So if let's say you do bad in one race, or 2 races, or 3 races, and it's a 10-race season, technically you're going to still be in the fight. And if you have a couple of disastrous races, you're okay. You'll be in the title fight and stuff like that. You'll be able to contend for it and go down and have it go down to the wire. In the 70s, though, that didn't exist. That wasn't the case. There was a bunch of rounds. I forget how many rounds were in the 73 season, but certain rounds counted. So if you won Le Mans, so what would happen is you'd score points, and let's just say for the 73 season, it was kind of up and down. There was times when Ferrari had an advantage, and there was a time when Matra had an advantage. There were times when Ferrari did good, and there was times where they did bad. And then there was times where Matra did good and Ferrari did absolutely horrible. And then Matra would do horrible. Like, they wouldn't finish a race. They wouldn't have any marks to do their thing. So Ferrari didn't have... So let's say at Daytona... Getting a little sports car. Let's say they got into Daytona. At Daytona, Matra and Ferrari didn't have quite, the factory teams didn't quite have good ones. In fact, Matra, I think, dropped out with all of its cars. Ferrari also had trouble. They did score points, though, because one of their GT cars scored points. And the leading car of the marque scored points. So if you were up, those points whether it was GT or prototype, counted towards your total at the end of the year. So Ferrari ended up scoring, drawing first blood. Then there was a couple of races where Matra did good, but Ferrari was close behind. And then I think at the Nürburgring, I think Matra had a disastrous race. None of the cars finished. Ferrari had a field day in the wet. Pretty sure they won at Monza because it's a home race. Matra ended up winning Le Mans, and Ferrari had a dismal race, but they still scored points. And they won one other race, and it was looking as if Matra wasn't gonna quite walk away with it. They were gonna need a miracle at the last race at Watkins Glen. I think they did somewhat good, and then the points tallies came up. Well, a bunch of the score guys at the end of the season said, "Well, you guys can choose which finishes you guys want to have count towards the championship. So you could drop your lowest result." Matra ended up, you could drop, I think it was the lowest results. It was two of the results that were the worst. The Nürburgring and I think one other race in Daytona where they didn't do so great. Those were the two difficult ones. Ferrari did somewhat good, and I think one of the Maserati, and I think one of the Alfa Romeos or one of the Mirages did good one of the races, so they didn't get full points. And the Ferrari dropped its two lowest races, which could have counted towards a championship. Matra actually ended up scoring more runner-up points, which helped them win the championship by the slightest of margins. And morally, Ferrari actually had it. So this engine, it was very close racing. Not saying the engine was bad, but they lost the championship on a technicality due to points, unfortunately. And the flat 12 or the V12 would soldier on into the mid to late 70s. In the 312 T cars that would be piloted by Clay Riccatelli and other guys, Niki Lauda, who had the famous Nürburgring crash that burnt him so badly inside the lungs and everything else that he was given the last rites. Yeah, so this was an engine where a lot of amazing things happened, and it won of many Formula One races to its name. The 3-liter V12 and the flat 12. I think it lasted up until I think its popularity lasted up until the late 70s, early 80s, and then eventually, the turbo era became a thing, and the flat 12 got superseded for a 1.5-liter V6 that had a single turbo and about 680 horsepower. The V12 wouldn't resurface in 3.5-liter form until 1988, 1989, when the cars went to normally aspirated engines after turbo engines were banned. And then in 1990, it was all normally aspirated. Unfortunately, the only thing was, though, the V12 that was in the cars that were piloted by Prost and Nigel Mansell in the late 90s and stuff like in the early 90s weren't the same guttural sounding V12s that were established in Formula One. Actually, I could show you a video. Very few cars sound this good. That was one. I wonder if there's any footage of this thing.
Hi, I'm Kalina. Today I'm using Upwork to hire a WordPress developer to rebuild.
No, I don't want. No, I don't want. No, I don't want that. That's a V10. That's a V10 right by it. That is how mythical that engine sounded. Now that was the flat 12/V12 from that era, and that is the reason why that engine is known as maybe one of the coolest engines to have run in a car. And that was in a 1970 312 T2 or T3, and those cars were legendary, and many races were won, many races were lost, many accidents happened in those cars. Very fiery accidents. So yeah, it was a great engine. And I hope you guys enjoyed this of the Ferrari V12. I will see you guys tomorrow for another vlog. Peace out, and I will see you guys on, well, hopefully tomorrow afternoon sometime. Peace out, and hopefully gameplay will be out tomorrow. But yeah, hope you guys have fun. And then I'll have Gran Turismo stuff on Monday. So hope you guys enjoy your day and your night and your weekend, the rest of your weekend. Peace out. I'll see you guys later. Have a good day. This is Mike Come Up from the Gear Change Show.